Grand Rising, I'm Ron Usha and welcome to show number 21 on Conversations on Art, a show where friends get together to talk about their art, their creativity, and hopefully we can learn something and maybe even inspire each other. Today on the show, I have an old friend, Lisa. Grand Rising, Lisa.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lisa sent me a bio, which I'm going to read out. I was a gymnast from the age of 6 and represented Great Britain from the age of 14 to 18. I spent 20 years as a senior club coach, regional judge, and club welfare officer. For the past 10 years, I have worked with children with complex medical needs. I am now studying to become a registered speech and language therapist. Thank you, Lisa.
That's okay.
Lisa, can you tell us how you got started in gymnastics?
Well, I was 6, I believe, when I started. I'd previously been sent to dance classes for a couple of years before that, and then moved on to gymnastics. So yeah, my mum took myself and my sister, who was younger, she was about 3 at the time, and just started at a regular gymnastics club in South London, and yeah, just very quickly sort of moved through sort of the basic classes and whatnot, and me and my sister ended up doing gymnastics there for 12 years. So it was just something I think that we both picked up very quickly, enjoyed, and just carried it right through. Yeah. So, but it began initially with dancing. That was the first thing, but then moved on from there to women's artistic gymnastics, which is the vault, bars, beam, and floor. So yeah.
Is gymnastics a sport where you have to start when you're so young?
I would say yes, really. I mean, there are gymnasts that start a bit later, but sort of if you start at that young age, it's so much easier to pick things up at that age. It gets more difficult as you get older. At the moment, the gymnasts are sort of going a lot longer than they used to. I mean, I sort of retired at the age of 18, which was quite late back then as a gymnast, whereas now they're sort of going on into their 20s. But with the equipment that we had sort of 30 years ago, it was difficult to do that, really. It's quite hard on you once you sort of, you get a bit bigger and go through puberty, etc. So the gymnasts tended to be very young. And it's a lot easier to sort of swing around the bars and things when your strength to weight ratio is a lot better when you're younger. So a lot of the gymnasts, did tend to start sort of at the age of sort of 4, 5, 6, and by sort of 14, 15 is when you were reaching your peak at that point. And then again, it sort of got a little bit harder after that to sort of keep up the level of skill that was required, particularly with the equipment that we had back then, which was absolutely nothing like what they have today, which makes things easier to sort of carry on a bit longer now with the sprung floors and, the width of the bars. Everything has changed so much in the last 30 years to enable the gymnasts to carry on that little bit longer. So yeah, with today's gymnasts, it may be possible to sort of start a bit later on, but you really need to have that foundation sort of as a child, even if it's not quite the skill level, but you need the foundation of the sort of the body conditioning and the discipline and whatnot to move on to the level of skill that you need sort of by your early teens, really, if you're going to compete at that level. So it's very young.
So at what age did you become a full-time gymnast?
Well, I was sort of quite early on. I was training, I don't know how many hours a week, but we were doing sort of 4 or 5 days a week, quite young, sort of within the first year or 2 of starting gymnastics. When I was 13, I believe, my mum took us out of school, out of education, because we were travelling quite a lot with gymnastics, competitions abroad, etc. So she actually took us out of school, homeschooled us, sort of in the mornings 5 days a week, and we were then in the gym at sort of 1 o'clock in the afternoon right through till 8-9 o'clock in the evening. And that was sort of, you know, as 13-14-year-olds, 5 days a week, training all day Saturday, so probably about 30 hours a week by the time I was sort of in my early teens. But yeah, that's the kind of dedication it takes at that level. So yeah, it's quite a lot. I'd say a lot of the gymnasts are training at least 25-30 hours a week to reach that level of skill.
That's a very young age to be training so hard for a sport.
It is, and it takes a lot of dedication, not just from yourself, but I guess from your family as well, the traveling and stuff. I mean, my dad was amazing. You know, he put up with a lot of it, not seeing us most evenings and whatnot, and then traveling with us at the weekends and taking us to sort of different parts of the country. Money-wise, I'm sure wasn't easy either, with sort of the equipment and the leotards and whatnot. So yeah, it's a lot of dedication involved from sort of everyone concerned, really. I guess when you're a child, you know, you follow, you know, what you were doing, what you started, what you're put into by your parents. You know, I was very lucky in the way that I loved it. I really enjoyed what I was doing. I think my sister was more the case that she followed on from me, and it was just it was a case of what we did, you know. So yeah, it does take a lot of dedication, and you need to love what you're doing. But there's also a lot of pressure. Yeah, there is a lot of pressure on young children, you know, and there are parts of me that, you know, however much I loved it, I did miss out on parts of my education. I did go back to college at some point, but I was, I think, about a year behind everybody else at that point. So for me, I mean, it was good, and I made sure that I went back and I got the experience of that, and then I got my education at some point afterwards. But you need to have your head screwed on not to let it completely and utterly take over your life. So, but I loved it. Yeah, I loved doing it, and I then went on to teach afterwards. So, but not at that level. Not at that level. When I taught, it was more, for me, it was more about enjoying the sport as a sideline or a hobby to, you know, to what else you've got going on in your life at that point, because you are still a teenager at the end of the day, and there are other things that are important, you know, at that time. You know, there's only a small percentage, very small percentage of people that actually make it at that level, and you don't then want to sacrifice everything else that you know that you can have as a teenager, your education, your social life, your friends. So it's quite hard finding that balance. I think to do it at a certain level takes a lot of pressure, a lot of dedication, and probably a bit of sacrifice, if I'm honest.
What is it like, pressure-wise, competing like that against others who are also training so hard? What is it like for you?
It's petrifying at times as a child. Yeah, when I look back now, I think, oh my goodness, I remember standing sort of at the end of the beam, which is like 4 inches wide. You know, there is no room for mistake or anything, and your legs would literally go to jelly, you know, and it's, yeah, that never went away. You obviously get people that are very different, and, you know, some people are great competitors and others can be fantastic in training and then fall apart at every competition. There is a level of pressure, but it also gives you that adrenaline rush as well. You know, like I said, I sort of used to go into competition and probably do things that I'd not done in training. It was just that level of adrenaline was like, you know, well, they're doing it, so I'm going to do it. You know, my coach wasn't always pleased most of the time, but for me, it was pressure. It was nerve-wracking, but it hyped me up, I think, to sort of compete better than I would have done. And yeah, and then you have other people that can't actually cope with that pressure. It's, you know, that's your one chance. It's a one-off, and once that's gone, you know, you've then got to wait for the next year or the next competition or whatever. It's a lot of pressure on a youngster, I think. Yeah, when you look back. But it depends. I think that depends on your mindset as well, doesn't it? And my coach was absolutely fantastic. Katie, she was amazing. And it really depends on that as well. Yeah, because it's, you know, it's how you're taught to compete. Is it the end of the world? You know, does it matter? Is your happiness and your mental health more important, or is the winning more important? You know, like I said, it's the same thing again. You've got to find that balance. But it was very, very nerve-wracking at times. Yeah, especially on the big, you know, the big stages like Wembley and Alexandra Palace and things like that. It's quite daunting for a child, I think.
What was it like when you obviously spent so much time training, but in the competition, things didn't go as well as you hoped?
It's horrible. It's devastating because you can't see what goes on behind the scenes. You can't see all that work, you know. And I've had so many people sort of over the years say to me, "Oh, you know, that's lovely doing gymnastics. You know, a little bit of dancing around the floor area and things like that." And it's, you know, and actually you don't see what goes on behind the scenes. I think probably half of our training was body conditioning and, you know, and running and stamina. And we used to go to a weights gym and lift weights. And, you know, there's so much that goes into it, and the repetition of skills over and over. You've probably done that routine 100 times before you go into that competition. And if on that particular day it goes wrong, you know, it's devastating. We all make mistakes, and, you know, you have to learn to sort of pick yourself up and carry on. But yeah, at that point it is hard because you've trained so hard for that moment, and then you make a mistake. You know, that is life. But as a kid, it's hard. Yeah. The more you do, I guess you learn to deal with it. But if it's one of those big competitions that you've been aiming for, you've probably been preparing for that for, you know, at least 6 months for that one particular performance. So yeah, it can be hard. It can be hard. But that's when you need those good people behind you to, you know, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You know, there will be other competitions. There'll be other times, and yeah, move on from there. Same as any sport, I guess, really.
I always thought that when young children watch sports, they see the end product. They see the match, which is maybe 2%. They don't see the 98%, which goes on beforehand, the injuries, the suffering, the pain, the agony.
Yeah.
They don't see any of that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does take a lot. I mean, aside from the actual time in the gym, which, like I said, was a lot of it spent on conditioning your body and, you know, 75 sit-ups and, you know, and squat jumps and running around the block and whatever, you know, but it was also at home as well. I mean, I remember sitting watching EastEnders sometimes when we used to tape it. My dad used to tape it for us to watch when we got home, and we'd sit and watch it in splits, you know, so that you're then doing your stretching at home and you've got your conditioning plans at home. And we used to go down the bottom of the block and we used to have to run around sort of 2 or 3 times. So it doesn't stop, you know, when you leave the gym. It really is sort of a hell of a lot of work behind those routines that you see. And, you know, and probably even more so for the girls now that sort of, you know, competing in the Olympics and things. I mean, the level of skill that they're doing is amazing, and you can't go out and do that without, you know, thousands of repetitions, you know, and you're starting obviously in sort of safe areas like into a pit and with crash mats and whatnot. By the time they get to that point where they are capable and safely performing those skills on the podium, you know, that training has been put in place years before that. So yeah, I think a lot of people with gymnastics don't really see the work that actually goes on behind the scenes. It's yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of dedication required and determination.
And gymnastics is a sport where there's not a kind of defined win or lose. It's judges deciding who did this move and is it right and so on. So can you tell us what really goes on? Because it's really down to a lot of times the judge's opinion to what is good or not.
Yeah, it can be very subjective. I mean, I was a judge also for, I don't know, possibly 10 years. Wasn't my favourite part. I preferred the coaching, but to be honest, I think to be a good coach, you also need to not necessarily be a judge, but you know, I would recommend doing the course, because you know, you need to know what the judges are seeing. As a coach, you can think that's absolutely fabulous, but then when you look at it through judges' eyes, it can be very different. And yeah, there's obviously the, you know, a whole set of rules, and you know, even down to things like, say, the handstands on bars, etc. You know, you've got your guidelines and you've got your angles of, you know, if they're in handstand, you know, there's no deductions, you know, you're so many degrees off, 0.5 deduction, this degrees off. So you've got all your guidelines, but there still is a very big part of it, I feel at least, that is quite subjective, especially when it comes to things like the artistry of the sport. You know, you can have two children that come up and compete those skills, you know, in almost exactly the same way. But one of them is going to perform it better or one worse than the other. You know, you've got the dance side of it and the artistry that really does make a difference to that performance. And, you know, or you've got one child that sort of looks like they're absolutely loving doing this floor routine, and another that's just going through the motions and it's very robotic. But you know, it really is very difficult. I've had lots of occasions where you've sort of been judging with a panel of 4 or 5 people, and you could literally come out with marks that are sort of 0.5, 0.8 different, and yet you've just sat and watched the same routine. So yeah, you have to, I mean, you know, you have to try and be very strict with the skills as such, and the spins and the handstands and things like that are where you really do have your guidelines. You know, was that double spin all the way round? You know, was that handstand actually in handstand? But then when it comes to, you know, oh, okay, we've got 0.3 at the end for artistry, you know, did I see the same thing as this judge next to me saw? You know, possibly not. My background was in dance, and my coach was she was actually a dancer at I'm trying to think what college it was in London, but her background was dance rather than gymnastics. So we had that instilled into us very young. And then, you know, other people may not have come from a background like that and don't quite see the same thing, you know, and they prefer to see just the level of skill. So it is very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult. I still watch things now, and although I haven't judged for sort of 10 years or so I can't claim to be completely up with the, you know, all the changes in the last 10 years, but I can still watch routines now and think, oh my goodness, you know, I thought that was better than the previous gymnast. And it's hard, but you do have, I mean, in the major competitions at least, you do have a panel of judges, so it's not just, you know, my decision to judge that routine. You have got to take, I mean, what they do mostly is they will drop the top score, they'll drop the bottom score, and then they'll average the 2 in the middle. So there is that level of fairness there. But yeah, it can still, and I'm sure is still very contested by lots of coaches at times as to what they felt it was worth and what was actually given for that routine. But Yeah, a lot of it is very skill based now, I think. So, which I guess does make it a little bit easier to judge. You know, it's much easier to see if a skill is done correctly, and if you've completed those turns or those jumps. It's a lot easier to see that than to see sort of the level of dance or artistry, or all these subjective things that are more difficult to sort of judge and put a label on, I guess.
Yeah, I read that as in regards to Simone Biles, that she's doing moves that no one else in the world can do, but she's not getting the points for these moves. Why is that?
Yeah, I think she's amazing. I mean, her skill level is absolutely amazing. She has got quite a few tricks that are named after her, because she's at least the first female gymnast to compete them. I think part of it is probably because of the level of difficulty. I mean, I understand that part of it, in that, if you suddenly go, oh, okay, well, this skill, is worth this much, which is way higher than sort of anything else that any gymnast is doing at the moment. We don't want a whole group of young gymnasts trying to throw that trick when they're not capable, and it can be dangerous. So I think a lot of it is possibly to do with safety, not to make it too much higher, that gymnasts feel that is what they've got to do to have any chance of competing against her, even let alone winning. So I think part of it is probably a level of safety. And yet we've not really had a gymnast like her, if I'm honest, in the last, however long. She's not my favourite gymnast. Her skill, as I said, is absolutely amazing. But if you look at her skill level and what she's doing, we've not had a gymnast that can do the tricks that she's doing ever. So, so the other side of that is like, yeah, you've got to give her credit for doing it. She's amazing. She's very, very capable. When I watch her, at least, I think, everything she does is, she's very safe. There doesn't look like she's struggling with those moves, But, like I said, you get another gymnast, a sort of 14, 15, that thinks the only way I'm going to compete with Simone Biles is to compete those tricks as well. Then yeah, you have got to think of the safety element, and, how far do you go? Do you suddenly say, right, okay, well, gymnasts may be able to compete a triple back on floor. We'll make that worth, so many points to encourage all these gymnasts to do it. But actually, it's very, very dangerous. So yeah, it's a very difficult one. But I do feel a little bit sorry for her, in that, the last competition I saw her in, she watered down a lot of those tricks, because it's not really worth her doing them for that extra 0.1 or 0.2, when there is possibly sort of a safety worry with it. So it is sad to say that she's not being rewarded for it. It's a really difficult one, to be honest. I think you've got to find that balance between rewarding the gymnasts for what they are doing and what they're capable of doing, but also not encouraging others to think that is the only way that they're going to be able to compete. So a lot of it is, I guess, about how you do the tricks, not necessarily whether you are throwing them, may possibly not very safely or not. So I think that's what they're trying to do, is keep that level of, we'd rather you do these tricks but do them properly, than to be throwing all sorts of tricks and you're falling here and you're getting injured there. And it's quite a difficult one, but you can't deny that what she is capable of doing is absolutely amazing.
Because what you're saying seems to go against the kind of evolution of where sports go. So runners get faster and faster, and she's moving it on to another level, but it seems that she's not getting rewarded for that level. So in the big tournaments, then, we're not getting the best Simone Biles. We're getting the Simone Biles to win the tournament. Yeah,
and that's right. And like I said, the last competition that I saw her in, she watered down a few of her routines, probably for that very reason, because there was really no point in doing it. She might throw this trick and then she takes 2 steps backwards out of it, because it's like, you know, one of the most difficult tricks that you can do. You know, and actually with those 2 steps, by the time she's lost the 0.2 for that, there was no point in her doing the trick in the first place that was only worth 0.2 more than doing something different. So yeah, that part of it is sad. And like I said, she is sort of, yeah, she's not being rewarded enough for what she's doing. And we do need to move forward. Of course we do. Yeah, we need to move forward safely, but we need to move forward. So I think it will. I think it will change, and I think sort of these things will be reconsidered when the next code of points comes out. The code of points is the sort of the, you know, the manual for judges and coaches. It's what every skill is worth, from the most basic sort of skill that's given an A, and then you go up to a B, C, D, and so on. So I think it will change at some point, once sort of maybe more gymnasts are doing sort of this level of skill. But I think she's the first one at the moment. You know, we've not seen anything like this before. We've never seen anybody do, you know, whatever it is she's doing, a Wchenko or whatever. I don't really think we know what to do with it at the moment, to be honest. It's like, oh my goodness, what, you know, what do we give this skill? We better not put it too high, because we might have 10 gymnasts try to throw it at the next competition and not land it very safely. So yeah, I think as sort of more and more gymnasts start to sort of catch up to where she is, it may change. But at the moment, yeah, she's not really receiving the credit that she deserves for those skills. I don't think she is, no.
And I wanted to ask you, especially with women's gymnastics, in what they're wearing. I saw recently that, I think it was either the Norwegian or the German team, if someone knows, please correct me, wore the full length leotard.
Yes, they did. The Germans, I believe, did in the Olympics, and I think they did in one international event before that. Like I said, I'm not up with gymnastics like I used to be. It may have been the Worlds, the Europeans, but they have before. Yeah, it wasn't something that was ever really seen before that. I don't believe it was even allowed when I was competing. You know, you wore your leotard and that was it. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, like I said before, when I was younger, sort of you hit 16, 17 and your career is coming to an end. You know, you can't possibly compete sort of once you hit puberty, etc., on the equipment that we had back then. You know, it was too hard on your joints and your bones and whatnot. But now you've got gymnasts going into their 20s. You've also got gymnasts competing now that have actually had children and are then returning to gymnastics. You know, you're talking about adults now, as well as sort of quite self-conscious teenagers that are expected to go up on this big stage in a leotard. You know, it's not appropriate anymore. It's not appropriate for the times. I mean, you know, obviously there are some gymnasts that maybe prefer that. You know, you need something obviously that's not restrictive. You need something that, you know, you can see the gymnast lines, you can see if the legs are straight, you know, but I think there should, we at least need to have that choice, because I'm sure there's many gymnasts who are not comfortable with what they have to wear to compete in front of this amount of people. Like I said, I couldn't imagine competing in that as an adult. It was hard enough as a teenager, but as an adult, I think, you know, you've got to allow adults to choose what they are wearing, you know, when they're up doing these sort of amazing tricks and, you know, whatnot. You've got this huge audience watching you, and you are essentially in like no more than a bathing suit. So no, I'm all for it. I think it's great, and I think it's great that they've got the chance now to sort of choose that kind of outfit if that's what they want to wear. And I think the Germans made a great stand with that, with their whole team in that at the Olympics. So yeah, all good. Things are changing, which is brilliant.
What was it like for you? I mean, so you're in front of a packed hall and you're wearing what you're wearing? And did it ever come into your mind when you were actually performing? Did it inhibit you? Were you thinking about it? What was it like for you?
Yeah, all the time, because I mean, like I said, particularly at a certain age, you know, when you hit 14, 15, especially for women, you know, and you're going through puberty, yeah, it's awful, you know, and you may be sort of competing, you know, not at an appropriate time of the month, or you know, and it's awful as a teenager. It's horrible. You don't want to be exposed like that, you know. And you've also, you know, a lot of gymnasts have this sort of body conscious, you know, you're very self-conscious about your weight, about what you look like. It's just constantly instilled into you from a very young age that, you know, you have to be small, you have to be tiny, you know, you have to be this weight to swing around the bars. And, you know, in my mind was always, you know, like, maybe not when I was very young, but definitely as a teenager, it was always, oh my goodness, you know, am I too big in this? Do I look bigger than those gymnasts? And, you know, so you've always got that part of it anyway. And then on top of that, you know, particularly in things like floor and beam routines that sort of are a length of time, they're sort of a minute and a half rather than just a 20-second vault. You know, you'd start your routine and you were all fine and whatever, and then halfway through, you know, your leotard's riding up, and you know you're not allowed to touch that, because if you touch it, you are deducted 0.1 each time. So you're going to lose marks. So, you know, it's, yeah, I had that awful feeling many times when I'm halfway through a routine thinking my leotard is riding up, you know, at the back, and everyone can see I'm in front of a room full of people, and I have been told specifically, do not touch your leotard during a performance. And it's horrible, you know, how then are you concentrating properly on what you're doing when you're actually worried about what you're wearing and what you look like, and if everybody can see. And it's not a nice feeling, no. So it's a difficult one. I would have loved as a gymnast to have had the opportunity to wear a pair of tights even, or we used to sort of get tights in training and cut them down, so they were sort of almost like sort of cycle shorts, just something that gives you that little bit more coverage, and you know, just makes you feel a little bit more confident and secure in what you're wearing.
If you've got to spend so much time thinking, or you spend so much time about how you're looking compared to another person and your weight, how much do you know a lot about, you know, eating disorders, and, you know, and just basic mental health in regards to, if this is just constantly on your mind, what you're eating, how you're eating, how did this affect you? And did you have any problems with food?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think many gymnasts that I know have, if I'm honest. I think things are changing, attitudes are changing a lot more, I think, today. We see a lot more gymnasts today that sort of, you know, they're more quite strong looking and sturdy, and I think it's more acceptable with today's gymnastics to sort of have gymnasts that are that shape. 30 years ago, whatever, you know, if you weren't tiny and stick thin, that was seen as the ideal shape for a gymnast. So yeah, there was a hell of a lot of pressure way back then, and like I said, it's very difficult. I absolutely love gymnastics, but a lot of it isn't ideal, and a lot of it needed to change. I've known many gymnasts that have sort of had eating problems. I did myself for sort of probably many years after gymnastics, and if I'm honest, still now at my age, it's still in there somewhere, you know. Oh, I shouldn't eat that, or if I eat that, I need to have 3 days compensating of not eating anything at all. It's just, you know, trying to find that balance for me has always been hard, and that's just in there from when I was young. And I was also the welfare officer at the club that I worked for 20 years as well, and sadly I did throughout the years see a couple of gymnasts with quite serious eating disorders that I sort of had to yeah, that I had to sort of liaise with certain services and things like that, and health services and whatnot, to yeah, to try to help. It's yeah, it's quite sad, the body image that was always put out for what gymnasts need to look like to be able to lift themselves around the bars, etc. It's, yeah, it's slowly changing. It's slowly changing. And like I said, if you sort of look at some of the gymnasts of today, they're not as tiny and as slight as they used to be. So sort of things are changing slowly, and you've got a lot of gymnasts that are stronger now rather than sort of very tiny. And but it is hard. I mean, and it does come from outside, obviously, and things, attitudes towards it need to change, but there's still that part of it, like I said, with the outfits and things, there's still that part of it that comes from you. You know, if you've got people watching you dressed in a leotard, you are going to feel that way, and you're going to put the pressure on yourself to, you know, to be as tiny as you can. So, but it is, yeah, sadly, it is quite a yeah, quite a difficult one in gymnastics. And yeah, you need those people around you. You need the attitudes to change. You need the coaches that are, you know, making sure that their gymnasts have the understanding, have the education, you know, and understand that, you know, if you don't eat, you starve yourself, whatever, you're not going to have the strength to swing yourself around the bars, no matter how tiny you are. So it's just really about educating children that they need to eat healthily to have the energy and the strength, rather than, you know, be as tiny as you can to lift yourself around the bars. So yeah, slowly things are changing, but yeah, it has been an issue over the years, unfortunately.
Did you have any help yourself? I mean, regards to like mental health, did you have help in mentally preparing for a competition, mentally, or just being able to speak about things with your coaches? Did you have that?
My coach was amazing. She was lovely. I mean, I can't say it was anything, you know, structured. We didn't have anyone in particular to go to, which I think might be different now, particularly at the top levels. You know, they have their own physios and their own counsellors and blah, blah, blah. You know, for me, it wasn't so much like that, but I knew that I could speak to my coach about anything. You know, she's still one of the closest people in my life today, 40 years down the line. So we had that relationship where I could have spoken to her about anything, any concerns, any worries. We didn't have anything sort of structured in place at that time. But yeah, I had people to speak to, which was good. Yeah.
And also you said you came from a dance background as well. So was gymnastics somewhere where you could show your own creativity? I mean, so lots of gymnasts may be doing the same moves, but was there opportunity for you to express through the move your own creativity?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, sort of, you know, I was competing sort of when the you know, you had the Russians and the Romanians in the 80s, that, you know, that will still always be my favorite. I have gymnasts from back then that are just absolutely beautiful. You know, they were at the top of their game, and that was who I aspired to at that point. So I used to go home and watch video after video of these gymnasts. They were beautiful. They had the dance backgrounds, you know. I mean, we used to do a ballet session once a week that was based on something that we saw from the Russians. So yeah, we used to emulate them basically, and they were amazing. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly in the floor and the beam routines, you know, that's when your dance backgrounds can come out. Like I said, my coach was also, she was at the Lava, and that was what I was trying to think of earlier. The dance centre, so her background was based in dance as well, so she was very, you know, very much like, you know, this is just as important part of your gymnastics as your skills are. Yeah, and it was, you know, it was our choreography for our sort of floor routines. It wasn't a case of, you know, well, let's choose this music, that'll do, and link it together, you know, one way or the other. It was, you know, there was a whole thing that went into it, and you know, it was all choreographed properly and specific music, and it all had a theme. And yeah, it was very much dance based, and it does give you a chance to sort of show your individuality. Like I said, if you've got two gymnasts competing exactly the same moves, you know, which does happen a lot of the time, because those are the things that you need to get your, you know, your marks up. So generally, you know, there's only so much that's going to distinguish you from the gymnast next to you, and that was your chance to shine in whichever way you can. So,
how much input did you have into choreographing your moves?
we were, as we got older, quite a lot, yeah, because, you know, we did all the dance classes as kids, etc. My coach was great at sort of, you know, teaching us to be able to sort of learn for ourselves, and we would then teach the younger gymnasts, and we'd take our own dance classes as we got older in the gym. She really encouraged that creativity, which was lovely. So yeah, I think probably by the age of about 13, 14, I was sort of choreographing a lot of my own routines, with some input obviously from my coach, but a lot of it was coming from us. And then we'd help each other as well. I did a lot of choreography for some of the other gymnasts as well at the club, and we all sort of helped each other. But yeah, it was there was a lot of input from us, which was brilliant. Yeah, which was lovely, because then you're bringing out your own individual style then, you know, and your individual tastes in the choice of your music and things like that, which I think is really important, because you're not going to perform at your best if you're not enjoying what it is that you're doing. So, but yeah, I mean, as I said, I think a lot of that also comes from your coaching, because, you know, you may have coaches that are not like that. You know, this is your routine, this is what you're doing, and that's it, you know. But ours was yeah, no, she was amazing. She encouraged us to sort of be very creative with our routines and bring out our own individual style, which is lovely.
What gifts or presents did gymnastics give you? I mean, so you, I guess, learned, you know, the dedication of training, of practice. Is there anything else that you think it gave you that you're maybe even using now?
Yeah, I mean, the discipline, I think, is one. Yeah, good or bad, I'm not sure. I sometimes think the perfectionist side of me probably causes me quite a lot of stress at times, because I like to, you know, if I'm doing something, I like to do it properly. And, you know, with my studying at the moment, it's like, Lisa, you don't have to be the best, you know, you just have to work at your own pace. But yeah, it definitely brings out sort of the discipline side of you, and to want to do things sort of the best that you can. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great for young children, particularly. You know, when I had my daughter, I didn't particularly want her to be a gymnast, if I'm honest. But at the same time, I thought I want her to have a passion in life. What that is, it doesn't matter. I wanted her to find her own way. But I think if you haven't got a passion and a discipline like that, you know, that's when you know, you have children that are bored, and what do they do at 14 if they've not got a passion in life? You know, that's when they get into trouble and hang around, you know. So I think growing up, to have that sort of that hobby and that discipline instilled in you is you know, really helpful for later life. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I look back on now and think, well, where would I be if I hadn't have done that? You know, would I be where I am now? Would I take things as seriously as I do now? Would I work as hard now to get what I want to do? You know, if I hadn't been brought up in that way. So yeah, it's helped me in many ways, and I think it does help young children to have a focus and a passion in life, rather than grow up sort of, you know, what do I do when I finish school kind of thing, you know. But
so you spoke about, like, you know, being the best, or the best that you can do. Is being the best, though, is it more like I'm trying to get out the most that I can out of myself, or is it a comparison to someone else?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just the pressure that you put on yourself, and I know I'm guilty of that. I know I am, and I've been told many times by my family, you know, you put yourself under such pressure, you know, whereas you know you don't have to. But it's just in yourself. I think it's just that feeling of, you know, you want to make sure that what you're doing, you are doing to the best of your ability. And yeah, I guess that competitive side of me is always there, but it's not, I don't feel like it's competition between anybody else. It's that pressure that I put on myself to do my best. And if I don't, then, you know, do I feel like I've failed, or do I then have to take a step back and think, right, I'm an adult now, I'm not a gymnast, you know, it's not the end of the world. But that is, yeah, that is still there, that sort of pressure to do your best. Yeah, I think that stayed with me all the way through.
So now you're studying to become a registered speech and language therapist. So you started at, so you were working and then you've gone back into education. So how challenging was that, going back into education?
It was hard. It was quite hard. It was exciting, but it was hard at my age. I'd worked sort of, I don't know how long, 30 years possibly by that point. But yeah, it was just something that I felt like it was time for me to do. I couldn't have done it when my daughter was younger. I couldn't have dedicated the time that I need to studying at home. So for me, it was the right time. But at the same time, you know, I don't think my brain's quite what it was when it was 20. I don't think I'm quite as quick at picking things up, and I'm not completely up with modern technology. So there was a part of it that was sort of quite daunting, you know, and it was quite hard to get back into that. But I think the sort of years of working before that, you know, has given me the dedication to go, well, okay, I was working full-time before, so, you know, I shall now work full-time, but at my degree. You know, if I have to work 5 days a week, and if I have to study the 3 days I'm not in uni, then that's what I'm going to do. So I think in that way it gave me the discipline to do that. But yeah, it was quite scary. Yeah, of course it was. And the thought of sort of going back into university with what I thought at the time maybe a lot of 19-year-olds was quite scary, but actually it's not. Yeah, it's not. There's probably over half of us that are sort of parents and, you know, in their 30s and 40s. So it wasn't, once I actually took that leap, I think, and went for it, I realized that actually it wasn't quite as scary as I thought it might be. But yeah, it was just something that I felt was worth doing, and I'd wished I'd done a long time ago, but actually sort of, yeah, with a mature head on you now, I think you take it a bit more seriously and you work a lot harder to get to that point that you want to get. So there's good and there's bads for both sides, I guess.
I always thought that sometimes, you know, so we go to school, college, it feels like sometimes we're on a treadmill and we're doing these things because we're told that's what you should do. And maybe it takes time for us to find out what it is that I want to do, because you maybe haven't met the person yet who's going to open your world up to, oh, this is actually a thing you can learn, or you haven't experienced things. So I always thought it would be a great opportunity, a great way just to, okay, you're allowed, if you don't go to university, you can still have your 3 years of free education later on if you choose to, when you find a passion for something that you would like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think back to when I was 19, I don't know what I would have done. If I'd have gone to university then, it possibly would have just been to study dance. The only thing I knew how to do, you know. And if you'd have said to me even 10 years ago from now about speech and language therapy, I'd have probably said to you, well, I don't know what that is, you know. And you're right, I worked in a school for children with sort of quite complex medical needs for you know, the past 10 years, and that's where I began to work with physios and OTs and speech and language therapists. And that's when I began to sort of get an interest in it. Up to that point, you know, all I'd ever known was gymnastics. So it was, you know, gymnastics till I was 18, coaching for the next 20 years. And yeah, it's not until this point in my life that I suddenly sort of went into a different career and saw different opportunities and suddenly thought, you know what, this is, you know, this is what I want to do. So yeah, for me, I think it's worked out at sort of the perfect time. Yeah, slightly later on in life, but like I said, I don't know if I'd have made the right decisions for me if I'd have done it back then. So
yeah, I think that's quite inspirational. I mean, because you're doing something because now you would love to do it, and you've had some experience working with children before, and to now do it because you love to do it. Is there any kind of advice you can give to others? You know, so a lot of people out there, they want to do their art, their creativity, or whatever it is, but they find these blockages of, I'm not sure if I can do it. I can't. Is it too late? I'm not sure what to do. I mean, is there any advice that you can give?
Well, I just think firstly, from my experience the last 2 years, I'm going into my final year now. So I've settled down now and I'm happier where I am now, you know, but at the beginning, yeah, I was petrified. But from my experience now, absolutely, it's not too late. You know, like I said, half of my cohort are sort of 30s, 40s. And I've sort of seen quite a few people around uni as sort of possibly older than that. I don't think it's ever too late. You know, it's not full of 19-year-olds. You're not going to feel out of place or made to feel out of place. You know, most of us have to work now until we're sort of 68. So for me, I'm thinking, well, you know, once I've qualified, I've still got 19 years left of work. So in that way also, you know, it's 100% worth it for that sort of last 20 years of my working life. And sort of, you know, apart from that, I just think you can do it, you know, whatever situation you're in. I think if you're dedicated, you know, you're willing to take the time, then yeah, I mean, I believe you can do it. You know, I'm not saying I'm the only one in that situation, but, you know, I'm a single mum, you know, yes, my daughter's a little bit older. And yeah, it's not been easy all the time, but you know, I've managed and we've got through it. And the way I see it is just that, you know, the end goal is going to be worth it for both of us. So I just think, yeah, if you have a passion for something and you want to do it, you know, give it a try. Give it a try. It's 3 years. It's 3 years of your life that could then make the next 20, you know, a lot better, a lot more fulfilling with your career. And, you know, obviously financially for me was another concern as well. And yeah, for that 3 years where I sort of thought, right, I'm actually going to take the leap and try now, I'm so glad I did, because I could quite easily have sat where I was, which I absolutely loved what I was doing, but there was no real opportunity for me to move forwards, you know, so I could have stayed there for 20 years, or you take that chance and you move on, you know, and yeah, you can only give it a try.
So the way you talk about it is, and you spoke about passion for what you're doing, it sounds like you had this passion for the dance, the passion for the gymnastics, and now it's the same passion which is driving you to do this course and engage in a new lifestyle, a new way of working, a new job. So it seems that's a running thread that's gone through everything that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's very different children that I was working with for the first 20 years of my working life to sort of the children that I've worked with for the last 10 years. But the passion is no different. You know, I've been working with children for sort of 10 years now that do have difficulties with communication, you know, some completely non-verbal, you know, particular child that I worked with one-to-one for the last 4 years at my school, you know, his condition was degenerative. So for him, the speech and language therapy wasn't about getting his speech better. It was about saving his speech for as long as was possible and keeping those lines of communication open for as long as possible, you know, which was never going to be forever, but, you know, to keep that independence that he had to make choices, you know, for as long as was possible, whether that was by speaking, you know, blinking at times, you know, and eye gaze, you know, all these different things. So I think for me, just working in that area and with those children that, you know, have got such difficulties at times, but the communication side of it is just, it's so important, you know, it really is. It enables them to make choices and do things like that in life that we take for granted every day. And yeah, it just gave me a passion to work with these children. And not only that, you know, you've got adults as well, obviously, with communication problems, sort of stroke, dementia, Parkinson's, things like that. And I just think it's one of the most important things that you can, you know, that you can help someone with, really, is to be able to communicate with someone else. So yeah, my passion shifted over the years, but yeah, I'd still love to work with children. I guess that's been the running theme all the way through. Yeah.
What have you learned, I guess, speaking with children and adults who have communication, who find communicating difficult through speech, in regards to how you communicate with others?
Lots of things, I guess, really. Just, yeah, I mean, even sort of children that do sort of, you know, have maybe mild communication difficulties, you know, it's behind a lot of things that I probably would never have realised at the time. You know, I think they said the figures at the moment are something like 70% of young offenders have speech and language difficulties, for example. And, you know, that never would have crossed my mind before, that actually, you know, you don't realise the impact that communication difficulties have on not only, you know, not being able to speak, you know, that's the basic one that we all know, but it also has a huge impact on behaviour and, you know, and on choices you make in life, and obviously on then the opportunities that they have later in life as well. So I just think it's shown me how much of a huge impact that it can have, especially when not recognised and not managed well. And yeah, for my own communication, I think just, yeah, it's just finding that respectful way, isn't it, to speak to people. I guess everyone's individual, each of their difficulties is different. You know, you don't want to speak to an adult in a way that, you know, that may be patronising because they've got this difficulty. So it's just really about sort of judging the situation, I guess, and, you know, slowing your speech down, but not to a point that, you know, that you are then sort of, you know, making it obvious that, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult, but you just have to think, I think, about the things that we take for granted and the way we communicate, and then adapt your communication to that particular situation in the best way that you can.
Lisa, that's an incredible figure, 70%.
I believe that's what I was told. Yeah, I believe it was 70%. And it was very, very high percentage of young offenders. Yeah. Yeah, that's quite frightening, isn't it, really?
So what about as well, I've gone into a different tap, but the same thing, but you know, there are those people who, I guess, who can speak, but can't because of maybe situations they're in, circumstances they're in, just shyness, or, you know, you're just not able to express yourself. How much then must that really affect your life if you just, maybe you're just in a relationship and you can't speak to your partner how you would like to?
Yeah.
How much does that affect your life?
Well, exactly. It's just, you know, communication is everything, isn't it? We're all, you know, well, you know, most of us are very social people. You know, the people around you and the communication you have. I think we don't. When you have that there without any issues throughout your whole life, you take that for granted. You know, to suddenly have that voice taken away from you, you know, is awful. And like you said, it might not just be, you know, an actual structural difficulty that you cannot speak. You know, I mean, speech and language therapists will work with sort of children with selective mutism, for example, and things like that as well. And you know, that's not necessarily about, you know, what is structurally wrong with this child that they can't speak. It's not about that. It's about the anxieties and, you know, the problems behind that. So there's so many different reasons. But yeah, I think we do really take it for granted when there's sort of, you know, so many people that are possibly struggling that we don't even realize. You might not see it. But it's it's just one of those things, I think, that's just so important that you try at least to enable everyone to have that voice. And if it's not a voice as such, you know, a means of communication, you know, whether that's signing or you know, adaptive communication, which can be like, you know, computer aids or whatever, but it's just giving people that opportunity to be able to communicate with other people, you know, because you can't do that. You know, you're also then going to have a lot of sort of, you know, issues aside from that of, you know, isolation and possibly mental health problems. And, you know, we need to be able to speak to people, and it's just enabling people to do that, I guess, in any way that you can.
Yeah, and I guess the frustration that must build up if, for whatever reasons, you're not able to voice your opinion or voice how you feel. What are some of the things that can happen to you if you're not able just anybody really, just express yourself and say how you're feeling, say who you are?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think that we've sort of, I'm not an expert in any which way as yet, I'm not qualified, but you know, a hell of a lot of our teaching has been around the sort of the social and the mental health side of the psychological, I guess, impact of communication difficulties. So, you know, it's not just this old-fashioned biomedical view of, you know, this child has a cleft palate or you know, whatever. It's also about how does that impact on this child's life or on this adult's life that's had a stroke, or you know, so you are looking at the whole impact, and that impact could be, you know, it could be huge. It could be things that you don't even think about. You know, obviously you've got the, you know, you can't speak, you know, you may lose a lot of friends that you used to have. You might lose the hobbies that you used to do. You know, you can't integrate so much in sort of your social circles. You then get isolated, you then get depressed. You know, work situations might change, and you know, if your work situations might change, your home situation is then going to change. You know, you've got role reversals at home of someone having to care for you, which is then, you know, probably really hard for someone to take that's maybe always been the breadwinner of the family, and suddenly you're at home, you know, with your other half caring for you. And you know, there's so many things that I think you don't see you know, on the surface, and maybe even as a clinician, you know, when someone comes into you, you know, you don't necessarily see the impact that it has outside. But I think the sort of the psychological side of it, as you've really got to try to consider what was this person's life like before, and how was this impacted on their mental health as well as on their physical health, you know, and what can you do to, you know, at least try to sort of make that better and integrate them into the things that they want to do, they enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe a lot of, you know, the outbursts of anxiety or rage or stress that we see just in everyday life, maybe just sometimes people asking, please listen to me, or please just give me the opportunity just to speak and be myself without being judged or put down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like I said, the thing with the young offenders, I think shows that really clearly, that, you know, there obviously is this huge level of frustration, you know, and you know, we don't know what's behind lots of things, do we? You know, the child kicking off at school, you know, is it because they're a bad child? Is it because they feel silly because they're sitting at the back of the class and they don't understand, you know? And it's yeah, it really can cause a lot. And yeah, it's hard, but it's just, I think it's just such an important part of life that we are able to communicate, or at least to have people understand and recognize if we can't. Yeah, I think the recognition needs to be there. You know, children are quite easily labeled as badly behaved when actually, you know, there could be a lot more going on behind it than that. So,
Before we go, have you got any incredible stories or things that you've seen or working with children that really just blew your mind, or
oh
huge
goodness,
smile on your face? Is anything?
probably loads.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. To be honest, when I was working at the school that I was, it was, for me, it was the most tiny things that, you know, but for those children, those tiny things are just like amazing. I do remember once coming home to my daughter and saying to her, oh my goodness, I nearly cried today. Or probably did, because I had a child that I don't know how long I'd been there, but I think it was a good couple of months by that point. And this child was quite severely autistic and just basically ate her dinner every day facing me on the other side of the table with sort of no eye contact and no anything. And I was the new girl, and, you know, and bit wary of me. And I think this one day she just literally stood up from the table, walked around the table, came up to me, put her arms around me, kissed me on the cheek, walked back round and sat in at her dinner game, didn't even look at me. And it was just, yeah, it was so silly. But I think that for her was a I trust you now, you're okay. And it was, yeah, it was really silly little things. And yeah, the smallest little achievement for some of those children is just absolutely amazing, you know, just a sort of, could be reaching out, it could be a smile, it could be anything depending on what that child was you know, struggling with. And the tiniest little things just, yeah, just make you think, wow, they're amazing. Yeah, we don't realize, do we, that we take all these things for granted every day. So
I think that, you know, that's so amazing, isn't it? It's not these big things that we remember. It's these little things that somebody has done or we saw, which can be it can be life-changing, can't it? These tiny little things. Yeah. You see openings that you never saw before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it also makes you realise, you know, when I'd sort of come home to my daughter and she moaned that, you know, her iPhone wasn't charged or something. And you suddenly think, come on, really, you know, it does make you sort of realise, you know, what's actually important in life. You're like, you know, some of these children literally had so many struggles, and yet were so happy just to see you, or for you to just go over and say hello, or give them a toy or something. You know, it was just, yeah, they were just amazing. I just, from the second I started at the school, I think, to me, I thought, this is what I want to do. Yeah, and I didn't know that before. It was sort of a, what am I going to do, to be honest, after the gymnastics? Where am I going to go from here? And yeah, and some of those children just made me think, wow, they're absolutely amazing. Like I said, those small achievements to us are massive milestones for them. And yeah, I just think they're amazing. Yeah.
One last question, Lisa. What is it like when you have that feeling at that moment and you say, and you know, this is what I want to do?
I think I was over the moon, to be honest. Like I said, I do think I was a little bit like, I can't do anything else. I don't know what else to do. You know, I've not been trained for anything else. And yeah, I loved it. I remember coming home from that job. I mean, I literally started as a midday supervisor, is how I started there, for what, sort of 6 hours a week. And within the first 6 months, I was like, no, I'm going to be a teaching assistant. And I did my MVQ too. And, you know, and it was just, yeah, it just gave me a motivation all over again, I think, to sort of go in a new direction, which was lovely. Like I said, I had to do my teaching assistant course. That was way back when. And that was my first step, I guess, back into education 10 years ago. To get the job that I wanted, but I just suddenly felt like I'd found something else that I wanted to do other than the gymnastics. And yeah, it was lovely. And it's, yeah, if I'd have known back then where it would have led me to now, you know, I didn't have a clue. I just knew that you know, I love these kids and that's what I want to do. So you've got to go with your heart, haven't you, with your passion, and do something that makes you happy.
Lisa, thank you very much indeed. I think the premise of this is learning from each other and inspiring each other. And I think, you know, hopefully, you know, we can all learn things from what you've gone through, what you've seen. So Lisa, thank you very much.
It's okay. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so this has been Ran Usher's Conversation on Art, show number 21. Thank you to Lisa again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.